The second impeachment of President Trump, new vaccine guidelines open the door for seniors, and Netflix moves to KO movie theaters. Here's what you need to know. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need2Know podcast for Wednesday, January 13th. I am Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano. Carlo, good morning.
Today is going to be another day, Jill. Yesterday, first of all, was yesterday not clearly a Wednesday?
It felt like it, actually, yeah.
Right?
It felt like I don't know. All these days just feel weird.
The news cycle, can we just take a minute and just acknowledge how surreal everything is right now? I mean, the president of the United States, a man who, if he wanted to, could wipe out human civilization with a nuclear bomb, with nuclear, launches, can't upload a video to YouTube. He couldn't open a store on Etsy if he wanted to. He couldn't send a Venmo. It's remarkable. We barely even talked about how President Trump has been all but banned from the modern internet. The whole thing is so surreal. I mean, if you're listening to this, if you're one of our younger listeners the news is not always like this. I know we've said that in the past. This is not normal.
No, it's not. But let's just try to make our way through it because a lot to get to today. So President Trump will likely make history as the first American president to be impeached twice. The House is set to vote on impeaching the president for inciting an insurrection. Congresswoman Liz Cheney, who is the number 3 House Republican, has actually come out in favor of impeachment. And this gives cover to other Republicans to also vote in favor. In the Senate, Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is said to be pleased that Democrats are moving forward with impeachment because it would be easier for the GOP to distance itself from the president once he leaves office. Now, should McConnell publicly come out in support of impeachment, there is a real possibility that Trump could be convicted and barred from running for office again. But remember, the Senate needs 2/3 of votes to convict and remove. More importantly, McConnell would need to call the chamber back to vote. It's currently in recess until the 19th. If he does this, he would signal that he's on board and give cover to other Republicans to vote to convict. But the question would be, if he could get 17 Republican senators, because that's a tall order. And just by the way, in the first impeachment go around, the only Republican senator that voted to impeach, I believe, was Mitt Romney. The first go around was completely partisan.
Right. That is the question. First of all, Liz Cheney, welcome to the resistance. But also in the House, Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy telling members, basically just throwing his hands up and being like, do what you want. I don't support impeachment, but if you want to do it, go for it. And specifically, he's telling Republicans who are against it not to call out their colleagues who vote for it because it could put their families in danger. That's sort of where we are in American politics right now. But back to McConnell, Jill, that he's the man to watch today. Obviously, he's probably one of the smartest elected officials in America, if not the single smartest elected official in America. So watch what he does. There is a non-zero chance that he flips today on Trump, which would be one of probably the most astounding political events in American history, at least in our lifetimes. Again, even if he does that, 17 Republican senators to sign on, like you said, that is a tall order, but they follow McConnell. So he is really the man to watch. I mean, I was thinking about this, you know how like when you get a lemon wedge with your drink at a restaurant and like you squeeze out the lemon and then it's just sort of like that husk, that like rind? That's sort of what President Trump follow me here for a second. That's sort of what President Trump is to the Republican Party, right? They have extracted all of the juice from him. They got everything that they wanted, right? He more or less governed like a normal Republican would in a lot of ways, right? They got their justices, they got the tax cuts. He has no value to them anymore. So the question now is, the political question is, can they cut bait without committing political suicide with his base? That's these people only make decisions based on, self, keeping themselves in what's going to be the thing that keeps them in power. So I think that is the only question that's on every Republican senator and Congress person's mind this morning.
And the president himself showing no signs of contrition for his part in this political crisis. In his first public appearance since the riots, Trump called his remarks before the siege, in which he told supporters to march to the Capitol, quote, totally appropriate. Um, his tone yesterday, he flew to Texas to tour the border wall. And he spoke to reporters for a brief minute or two right before he boarded. Zero remorse. Again, just standing, kind of digging in that this is all a political witch hunt. So no change in his tone at all.
Yeah, I didn't find that surprising. I don't think he's really capable of contrition. I did want to mention this one piece of
Look, wait,
reporting
just
from
really
CNN.
quick. If
Oh,
he
sorry.
got COVID and was hospitalized, and if that didn't make him change his
Good
tune at
point.
all
Yeah.
about the coronavirus and the seriousness of it, I agree with you. I think that he is who he is.
Yeah.
And I think this is what who was it? Maya Angelou who said, when someone tells you about themselves, or,
Yeah.
believe them. So
Believe them. Yeah.
I think that this is who he is.
Yeah. I forgot. Sometimes I forget the president got the coronavirus. That was a crazy week, huh? Remember that? Whenever that was,
I
10 years
remember
ago?
getting the New York Times alert. I was in bed. I think or I'd woken up and I was like,
Yeah.
what? What? I
Yeah.
mean, that was
That was
one of the more
bananas.
shocking pieces of news.
Um, it's funny. One day Alex is gonna like come home from middle school history class and be like, "Mom, were you alive during this few months? Because that was some crazy, you know what, that went down." And you'll be like, "Oh, I was alive. Carlo and I covered it."
Well, I'm thinking that I've thought about this because we take pictures now, and we've gotten together with family, especially over the summer when we were outside, and everyone wears masks. And like we
Yeah.
have pictures that I've blown up on our wall where her cousins are wearing face masks. They went through a pumpkin patch, they did
Yeah.
stuff like that. And I'm thinking in 10 years from now, I mean, hopefully we will still not be wearing face masks when we go out, and hopefully we will not have another pandemic on our hands. But I wondered, just how those pictures age, right? Just they're going
Yeah,
to
it's
be
gonna be very
so,
weird.
right now we're so used to it.
Yeah.
But that is not normal
Right.
for Americans.
One thing before we move on, I just wanted to mention this piece of reporting from CNN because I thought this was very important. Stop the Steal organizer Ali Alexander, he's one of the guys who was arrested for his role in the riots. He said that he was getting help from three members of Congress inside the building: Paul Gosar, Andy Biggs, and Mo Brooks. That's something we got to follow, because if that's true, I mean, I don't know how those men, those elected sitting congressmen, wouldn't be expelled immediately if that turns out to be true. So we'll just keep an eye on that.
The FBI, we're learning, was aware that extremist groups were preparing to travel to D.C., quote, ready for war ahead of the Capitol riots. This is according to an internal memo obtained by the Washington Post. The memo contradicts claims that federal law enforcement was flying blind and didn't know about the possibility of violence while a joint session of Congress was gathering. Meanwhile, the Department of Justice gave its first briefing since the riots, the first briefing from anyone, really. The DOJ saying it's considering filing sedition charges against some of those people involved. So pretty big news there, Carlo.
Yeah, although it was interesting that the head of the FBI, the Attorney General, none of them were actually at that briefing. It was more just like these low-level prosecutors, which was a little bit weird. It's like, I don't know. There's some talk,
Bill
Joe,
Barr,
about
by the way, looking like
yeah,
a genius at this point. For just
yeah,
politely
cutting bait and
removing
getting out
him
of
from
town.
this
Yeah.
administration.
That's a good point. Forgot about old Bill Barr. There's a lot of talk, especially in Democratic circles, about passing new domestic terror laws in the wake of last week. I just wanted to sort of like make note of that. It's not even just at Democratic circles. It's just sort of like you can see it sort of gaining steam in the blob, if you will, the blob of sort of Washington insiders. Having lived through post 9/11, like the mass freak out in this country when everybody basically lost their collective minds, I just get very nervous anytime I hear about like new terrorism laws. I find it very hard to believe that the Capitol Police need more money, right? Or that the FBI needs more surveillance tools, or the DOJ needs more statutes to charge Americans. I mean, what happened at the Capitol? It's not like it happened because there weren't laws keeping that from. I mean, what those people did was illegal, right? Um, it, it was an intelligent and law enforcement failure of imagination at the very least. I mean, isn't this why we have the Patriot Act, right? Isn't this why, as we learned from Edward Snowden way back in the day, that the NSA has been basically eavesdropping on all of our calls and emails for the last 20 years? Isn't this why we've allowed the TSA to manhandle us and degrade us at airports for the last 20 years? Like, there is this massive security apparatus in America, but it appears to be pointed at the wrong thing. I mean, the Washington Monument, we mentioned this yesterday, the Washington Monument is closed through the inauguration, not because of a threat from Al Qaeda or from ISIS, from far right fringe lunatics. That's who the threat is from. We don't need more laws, in my opinion. We need intelligence and law enforcement to work together, do their jobs, and enforce the laws that we have. By the way, in case we need a reminder of where the real threat is, there's going to be more troops at the Biden inauguration next week than there are troops in Afghanistan and Iraq combined right now.
JD Durkin, Carlo, who of course is our congressional correspondent at Cheddar, tweeted, quote, "Gotta love when the United States Congress needs to be told to wear masks during a pandemic and not to bring their guns onto the House floor." So I just to the point of what you were just talking about, it's like these are Congress people, right? I mean, and just that idea that potentially there were even members of Congress helping the riot last week and helping them figure out where to go or whatnot. It's all just, almost, it's too much to even believe it at a certain point.
I'm glad you mentioned, Jill. I'm glad you mentioned the metal detectors thing last night. Did you see all this hubbub about some of these members of Congress who wouldn't go through metal detectors? They were just like, no, like I'm going to try that. By the way, I'm going to try that when I go to the airport next time. I'm just going to be like, nah, I'm not going to go through the security line because I don't have to. I mean, it's just it is astounding that these people, the entitlement that these people have. I mean, carry on. I'm sorry.
Okay, let's switch gears because we do have to get to a couple of major changes to guidelines related to the pandemic. Anyone flying into the United States will soon be required to show a negative COVID test before boarding their plane. The new CDC policy is going to take effect in 2 weeks. It covers foreigners as well as American citizens abroad, even if they've been vaccinated. Meanwhile, the federal government also changing its guidelines for the vaccine rollout. It will no longer hold back second doses. The White House is recommending that states prioritize getting the first shots into the arms of anyone 65 or older, as well as high-risk people, as quickly as possible. All of this is we're notching 4,000 deaths a day now. You can't get blind to that number. It's absolutely staggering.
It is. And in any normal time, obviously, that would be the one and only story that we'd be covering. So look, the 65 and older, that's a big deal. I think everybody, I broke that news to my parents yesterday. I just, make sure that you check your state's website, because if you have someone in your family who is 65 and older now, chances are they should be able to get a vaccine slot at least before they all run out. There were a couple of success stories we heard about that I want to shout out from listeners, just to show that we are making progress, right? There's a little bit of a glimmer of that light at the end of the tunnel that I think we're starting to see. First of all, just in my own family, Becky's 84-year-old grandma in Romania, she got her shot yesterday. Great news, big news in our house.
Yay.
So that's excellent. We were worried about her, and that's great. She no longer has to live, in fear of this thing, which is just fantastic. In terms of listeners, though, Lori wrote in. Her 79-year-old mother in Davidson County, North Carolina, got her shot. Jonathan in Palm Beach, his parents in Davie County, North Carolina, they got their shot. So first of all, what are they doing in North Carolina? And can we put these people in charge of the federal government? I mean, who's the governor of North Carolina? It's Roy Cooper, I think, right?
I don't know.
What is the secret sauce there, North Carolinians? What's going on down there? Give us a piece of that.
My friend Jenny, who's an avid Need2Know podcast listener, she wrote in yesterday. She lives in Florida, and she told me just in regard to what we were talking about just how difficult it's been to navigate some of these websites to sign up. She said she spent an hour or so trying to figure it out herself. And then she signed up her mom, who was able to get the vaccine. It was pretty smooth. She showed me the video of them kind of driving up to it. It was a drive-through vaccination center, which is pretty much the way that it should be going. And she said she helped 40 other seniors sign up. So
All right,
I
that's what
don't
I'm
know. I'm
talking
not
about.
going to give out her phone number, but for people who are
Yeah,
having trouble navigating, I just that was just kudos to her for doing that because
absolutely.
it is not easy to navigate these websites. I just have to admit I've been trying to do it for my own parents, and I can't even
Yeah.
figure it out.
Yeah, it's all hands on
And
deck, man. If you've got like older people who are not very computer literate, like help them out, right? Let's help each other
yeah,
out. Let's get these shots in the
in
arms,
New
man.
York, they're turning Shea Stadium into a big vaccination site. They're going to be turning Jones Beach, the parking lots there, into a big vaccination site. So hopefully this thing's going to get moving, and hopefully it will eventually become a supply issue, right? And then hopefully that supply will catch up. The real frustrating part of it has been that the supply had been there and it was just incompetence getting it into people's arms. So hopefully that's
Yeah.
about to change. Switching gears again, Sheldon Adelson, the casino magnate and the GOP megadonor, died at the age of 87. He grew up in Boston during the Depression, right before rising in business to become one of the richest people in the world as founder and CEO of the Las Vegas Sands, which owns casinos and hotels around the world. Along the way, he spent a lot of money to influence Republican politics and U.S. policy toward Israel and other Jewish causes at home. Adelson, the largest single donor in the 2012 election, and President Trump's largest donor in 2016. Really?
A, I mean, hard to overstate how much influence he had in Republican politics and Republican circles. If you remember, President Trump actually, when he was running, he initially trashed Adelson as part of sort of like the GOP donor class that he was trying to overthrow. That all stopped when Adelson said that he would open up his wallet and basically fund the Trump campaign. So that investment paid off. President Trump, his close ties with Benjamin Netanyahu, moving the Jerusalem embassy, a lot of those things, a lot of those policy decisions can be traced back directly to Adelson. So I'm glad we're just getting on the record because he was whatever you think about him, he was an incredibly influential person in this country.
Netflix's full programming slate for this year is out, with movie theater operators hoping to be able to salvage at least some of this year. The streamers going all in. A record 71 movies across genres is going to debut on Netflix in 2021, including major big budget flicks starring A-listers and Oscar winners like Leonardo DiCaprio, Jennifer Lawrence, Lin-Manuel Miranda, and Dwayne Johnson. More than one a week, plus more than a dozen drama series.
If you can today, check out I threw it in the newsletter. It's like a 2-minute, what do they call that? Like sizzle reel of like the all the movies coming out on Netflix. It is remarkable. As any boxer knows, Jill, the time to deliver the knockout is when your opponent is on the ropes, right? That's the strategy. Movie theaters. This is not what they need. They need people they need butts and seats as soon as possible. But I know that this is something that we've discussed in the past. But Netflix, I think it doesn't have a quantity problem, right? It has a quality problem. I think that there's a lot of stuff on Netflix that, like, my brother said this once, and it always stuck with me. He's like, watching a Netflix show is like eating McDonald's. Like, it's really good in the moment, and then like you forget about it and it sort of like moves right through you. I always thought that was like a really clever way of describing it, because I feel that with some exceptions, like The Crown, for instance. The Crown is a great Netflix show, but I feel like a lot of their content, you watch it and then it's just sort of like blah,
I'm with you, and I think it's getting worse. As they try to produce more and more stuff.
Mhm.
I think that the overall level, I guess the average has gone down in terms of what's actually good.
Yeah.
And I totally agree. The Crown is awesome. But remember, I mean, there was a time when all they really had was House of Cards, Orange is the
Mhm.
New Black. And those were all really high quality shows. Now it's kind of just like the kitchen sink, right? That throw whatever
Yeah.
you can against the wall and see what sticks.
Yep.
So I don't know. look, I don't think movie theaters are done. I think as soon as there's some semblance of normalcy in this country, I think people are going to be really itching to go back to theaters if there's movies to see, right? If the
Right.
content is
Right.
still there. So we don't talk about the late night wars much, probably because late night shows don't really have the cultural importance that they once did. But Jimmy Fallon is in ratings trouble. The Tonight Show saw its smallest TV audience ever for an original episode on Monday, drawing just 947,000 total viewers, according to preliminary numbers. In comparison, Colbert had 2 million viewers. Kimmel had 1.7 million. Fallon, if you remember, not that long ago, he was actually on top of the late night wars until late 2018 when Colbert first passed him. So this has been a really quick reversal
Yeah.
of fortune here in late night.
And it's interesting because Colbert made this strategy move where he was like, I'm going to go all in on being anti-Trump, basically, right? Political humor, anti-Trump humor, and that worked for him. Fallon's not really a political guy, so that he hasn't been very political, and the last couple of years have been very political. But I think what's more interesting about this, there's just in terms of late night television, like it used to be that that's where you went to sort of get like the funny take on what happened today or like whatever people were talking about, right? All of that now happens in real time on social media. The memes, right? The jokes, the viral threads that used to be the content that was in like a Letterman monologue or like a Leno, joke or whatever. That's all happening on the internet, right? So it's very hard to compete with that. Although I will say, I always thought that Donald Trump would make a very good late night host.
That's so not where I thought you were going to go, Carlo. Listen, I'm a huge Jimmy Fallon fan. I've always been.
I like Fallon.
I've always liked him. If you remember, though, during the 2016 campaign, he was really criticized because Trump was a guest. Trump went on,
right? Yeah,
and Fallon kind of like normalized him. He made him, he was.
Hair, right?
He played with his hair. He was like, "Is this thing real?" And it kind of made Trump a little bit more likable, perhaps, or more approachable. At least that was the criticism against Fallon. I personally like that he hasn't gone political. I need a break from all this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not up, by the way, at like 11:30.
Yeah.
It's way past my bedtime, so I'm not the target audience here. But I appreciated the fact that he sort of stayed silly and light and didn't go really political. But I think it just shows you what people want, right?
It's interesting because you would have thought the
I
opposite.
don't know. I don't know
right?
what else to say about it.
Yeah, you would have thought people at the end of the day would be like, I don't want to hear about Trump. I want to hear about, some funny song that you're doing. But apparently not.
All right. So we do have to leave it there. That is what you need to know for Wednesday, January 13th.
Okay, see you tomorrow. Big day today. We'll cover it tomorrow.